open up the show talking about the visit to the White House today by what is now being called the president of Syria, who in fact spent his entire adult life as an operative and then a leader for al-Qaeda, one hated so much by the United States government that as recently as 11 months ago, they had a $10 million bounty on his head, accusing him not just of being a leader of al-Qaeda and killing Americans, but also working alongside ISIS. But he's now a beloved leader. They put a suit on him, changed his name, and seems to have undergone a complete transformation, at least in terms of how he's treated. Somebody who for years was considered one of the worst terrorists on the planet. I think it says so much about the war on terror, about the emptiness and manipulative propagandist nature of the term terrorism. I talked about it at the start of the show, just giving the context for the war on terror and the 25 years of the radical changes it ushered in, to point out how, in so many ways, bizarre this is, how history is so easily rewritten on at the spur of the moment. So here's the New York Times today. Syria's president meets Donald Trump at the White House for the first time. Quote, President Trump waived sanctions on Syria on Monday after meeting with President Ahmad al-Shara at the White House, the latest effort to throw his support behind the former rebel leader who had once been designated a terrorist by the United States with a $10 million bounty on his head. And again, as an aside, that wasn't 20 years ago. That was less than a year ago that the United States called him a terrorist, so evil and so wanted that they had a $10 million bounty on his head. Mr. Trump has granted Syria-wide exemptions on sanctions and pushed for Congress to repeal 2019 law, the Syria Civil Protection Act, which imposed the toughest sanctions on Syria. On Monday, he issued a 180-day waiver so that he first granted in May. It was Mr. al-Shara's first visit to the U.S. Capitol since coming to power, and the first by any Syrian head of state to the White House. Quote, we want to see Syria become a country that's very successful, and I think this leader can do it, Mr. Trump said. People say he's had a rough past. Yeah, we've all had a rough past. Who hasn't been an al-Qaeda leader before? We've all had rough pasts. But he has had a rough past, and I think, frankly, if you didn't have a rough past, you wouldn't have a chance. I mean, that is Trump's view of the world. It's not entirely baseless, that in order to become an effective leader, especially of a complex country, you have to have shown some grit. But we fought a 25-year war based on the view that we've never faced anything as evil or as dangerous as al-Qaeda. And so to call being a leader of al-Qaeda having a rough past sort of minimizes the entire premise of the war on terror, which, by the way, is ongoing and which radically changed our country and its standing in the world in so many ways, in permanent ways. Here was Trump offering a similar analysis when he was asked about the terrorist who used to be called al-Jilani, and now is President al-Shara. Here he was in the Oval Office November 10th.
Syria you had earlier. Did you come to any agreements today?
Well, I had an agreement with him. He's a very strong leader. He comes from a very tough place, and he's a tough guy. I liked him. I get along with him. The president, the new president of Syria. And we'll do everything we can to make Syria successful, because that's part of the Middle East. We have peace now in the Middle East, first time that anyone can remember that ever happening.
Now, I'm not suggesting that the United States should go to war with Syria or try and kill the new Syria leader because of his longstanding ties to al-Qaeda, but I'm not somebody who believed in the war on terror and the premises of it from the start. So, of course, I wouldn't believe that. But it was the bipartisan political class in Washington that believed in that and continues to believe in that. That wherever we find al-Qaeda leaders, we have to bomb them, not hug them and embrace them and praise them as a good guy and welcome to the White House. It really, for me, just gives the important part of this story is not that Trump per se is doing anything wrong, but that it just gives the lie to the entire war on terror, the whole narrative that we were fed. Again, not just to justify all sorts of foreign wars that killed huge numbers of people and cost $2 trillion and enriched the arms dealers, but radically transformed the nature of American politics and the powers of the American government inside the United States with respect to our own citizens. The Patriot Act and all of the carousel of evils that we're living with today was all based on this idea that everything had to be done for the paramount goal of extinguishing al-Qaeda. One of the people who did believe that was Donald Trump. And let's remember that in the Obama administration, Hillary Clinton was a very vocal advocate of removing Bashar al-Assad from power, of empowering the CIA, to go wage war in Syria to take out Assad, in part because it was part of her obsession with Russia. Assad was an ally of Syria, but also she was a loyalist to Israel, and Israel wanted Assad gone. He was a link between Iran and Hezbollah, part of this axis of resistance that opposed Israel. And Donald Trump's view when he ran for president in 2016, but also before he even announced his presidency, was that the Obama covert war in Syria, where Obama didn't give Hillary everything she wanted, he unleashed $1 billion a year CIA covert war to remove Assad. We were looking to remove Assad, knowing that who would replace Assad would be people who are Al-Qaeda or Al-Qaeda adjacent, meaning we were still waging the war on terror based on the argument that Al-Qaeda, there was no enemy like it, nothing threatened us more, we had to extinguish them no matter where we found them. And then in Syria, the Obama administration was essentially engaged in an operation to remove Assad for some reason. Someone the United States had worked with, had sent people we detained and picked off the street of Europe during the war on terror and sent them to Assad to be tortured. Suddenly removing Assad was some huge priority of the United States, even though the people fighting against Assad, at the beginning they were ordinary Syrians, but by the time the war really broke out, as often happens, it was the experienced fighters of ISIS and Al-Qaeda fighting against Syria. And we knew that removing Assad would result in Syria, the Al-Qaeda becoming empowered. And it was Trump himself who said it here, September 4th, 2013. Many Syrian, quote, rebels are really radical jihadis, not our friends. And supporting them doesn't serve our national interests. Stay out of Syria. Which is not exactly a crazy idea if your entire country is reorganized around the idea that you have to destroy Al-Qaeda, and you suddenly find yourself engaged in a covert war and increasingly an overt war that has either the goal or the likely effect of empowering Al-Qaeda in that country. It does seem extremely contradictory, to put it mildly. It kind of makes the whole war on terror and all of the radical erosion of rights and death and everything else that ushered in a gigantic fraud. It's kind of hard to maintain the central premise that Al-Qaeda is the world's greatest threat when we're actually looking to empower Al-Qaeda in Syria, something that we've now successfully done, and we seem thrilled about it. As does Israel, that boasted that it played a major role in accomplishing that. Here is an email that was inside the Hillary Clinton State Department in 2012 while the United States was fighting this covert CIA war to remove Assad. It was an email that was released ultimately as a result of the hack of the Hillary Clinton emails, and it was published by WikiLeaks. And it is an email from Jake Sullivan, who of course became Joe Biden's national security advisor. A lot of people think he ran foreign policy as Biden's brain was melting. I certainly think that. He also had a very high up position in the Obama State Department under Hillary Clinton. And he wrote an email that is now a notorious email to Hillary Clinton about the situation in Syria. This is basically a decade after September 11th. The war on terror is in full force. Obama's embracing and extending many of the Bush-Cheney policies that he vowed on his campaign to uproot, saying, no, Al-Qaeda is still an existential threat. We have to keep these powers in the hands of the U.S. government, including the United States. That was NSA spying and without warrants and everything else. And it was all based on the idea that Al-Qaeda was the gravest enemy we've ever seen. And yet, as this then secret email inside the Clinton State Department acknowledged on Syria, Jake Sullivan wrote to Hillary Clinton, see the last item. Al-Qaeda is on our side in Syria. I mean, it's really one of the most remarkable things. Al-Qaeda is in our side on Syria. We're fighting this major covert war at the peak of the war on terror. And we weren't there to fight Al-Qaeda. We were there to fight with Al-Qaeda. Knowing that if we succeeded in our goal, which was removing Assad, it wasn't going to be some nice Syrian liberal who was going to take over that country, that very geostrategically crucial country in the middle of the region. It was going to be Al-Qaeda. We were fighting a war to empower Al-Qaeda in Syria. It took a decade. And we finally succeeded in it. We seemed utterly giddy about it. Like, we couldn't be happier with the Al-Qaeda leader who less than a year ago we wanted to kill and fine and pay $10 million to do so based on the fact that he was the evilest of terrorists. He just put on a suit, changed his name, promised to love Israel and join an alliance with Israel, and now, poof, all the al-Qaeda evil is gone. In case any of you have doubts about whether any of this was ever authentic or sincere, or whether the word terrorist actually means anything. The fact that it can just be diffused in an instant. Here from the BBC, this was December 20th, 2024. Again, less than a year ago. This was when essentially al-Qaeda forces swept into Damascus. U.S. scraps a $10 million bounty for the arrest of Syria's new leader. I remember when he, at the time, was known as al-Jawani still, before he got his makeup, his Western makeup. I remember he led forces into Damascus, and he was appearing, giving press conferences, and right on the DOJ site, it still had this $10 million bounty on the head. And I wrote an email to the Justice Department saying, hey, you have a $10 million bounty on the head of al-Jawani for information leading to his whereabouts. I know where he is. He's in the presidential palace in Damascus. Here you have the Justice Department. This is up at least as late as November 2024. There you see a picture of him. That's al-Jawani, President al-Shara, as he's now known. Stop this terrorist. And you see he exchanged his classic terrorist headgear and clothing, camouflage clothing, for Armani suits. Still the same person. Stop this terrorist, Mohammed al-Jawani, reward for justice, up to $10 million reward. And then at the bottom in small print it says, Mohammed al-Jawani, also known as Abu Mohammed al-Jawani, also known as, and then various other names, is the senior leader of the terrorist organization, the Al-Nusra Front, Al-Qaeda's affiliate in Syria. Under al-Jawani's leadership, ANF has carried out multiple terrorist attacks throughout Syria, often targeting civilians. The U.S. government is offering a reward of up to $10 million for information about al-Jawani. Absolute confidentiality is assured. So this wasn't just some guy who joined al-Qaeda because he had nothing else to do. He was some low-level courier. According to the Justice Department, he was the leader of al-Qaeda's affiliate in Syria who was responsible for deliberately slaughtering civilians across the country. He spent time in an American prison in Iraq as well. And then less than a year later, no longer a terrorist. He's an honored leader of a sovereign country, a friend of the United States, someone Donald Trump admires despite his rough past. Here from ABC News in February of 2012, this was about the organization which al-Jawani founded. Twin suicide attacks rattle Syrian city of Aleppo. He was accused of having carried out suicide attacks against civilians in Aleppo, which we were always told was the hallmark of radical Islamic terrorism. So this wasn't a guy who kind of was a member in good standing, the way you can join a union and not really participate. He was the leader who carried out, according to the United States, suicide attacks. Here from Al Arabiya English, June of 2015, Al-Qaeda's Syria affiliate kills 20 Druze. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said the deaths come Wednesday in the village of Kaib Lazwa in the Idlib province. Here is some of the reaction to al-Shara's presence, al-Jawani's presence in the United States when he came first in November of 2025. Really, I want you to just imagine going back 20 years ago, but even 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, and tell people, look, I know you're in the middle of the war on terror. You believe the most evil groups are the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. We have to even dismantle our own civil liberties to destroy them, fight endless wars to do so. But I'm just telling you, in 2025, the Taliban are going to be governing Afghanistan with absolutely no opposition, as if nothing ever happened. We're going to fight a 20-year war in Afghanistan. And once we leave, Taliban is going to be like, all right, we're here. Time to go back and into power and govern Afghanistan as though exactly like a 20-year war that just might as well never happen. Not one thing changed other than a bunch of deaths and money. And on top of that, a senior leader of Al-Qaeda is going to come to the United States and be granted and be welcomed by throngs of cheering people and then embraced by the President of the United States as a great friend of the United States. Not someone who was in Al-Qaeda in 2005 and renounced it and defected to the West, but somebody who less than a year before was called one of the worst terrorist leaders, one of the leading Al-Qaeda leaders by the Justice Department. I mean, it's a farce. It is a farce. And the farce demonstrates that this word terrorism, which is at the center of our legal framework, which dominates our political discourse. You call someone a terrorist, it's supposed to be the end of the debate. Oh, look what we're doing to this person. Oh, he's a terrorist. Oh, he's a terrorist? Oh, in that case, who cares? Torture him, drown him, poke his eyes out, send him to Sudan in a prison even though he's never, whatever you have to do, he's a terrorist. Oh, we're blowing up boats? That sounds odd. What about the evidence that they're doing something wrong, like carrying drugs, no, these are narco-terrorists. Oh, okay, terrorists. I'm sorry, I didn't know. Yeah, of course, you killed them. No evidence needed. Why would you don't protect terrorists? That's how powerful this word is. This word means nothing. It means nothing. It's just assigned arbitrarily to whoever we want to demonize to justify whatever we want to do to them. Routinely, people who attack soldiers in an active military are called terrorists. People who target civilians are not. People who are terrorists one day become freedom fighters the next, and vice versa. This has been going on for decades. This is a word that is bereft of meaning. It's a pure propaganda term. Maybe in academia you can find fixed meanings of it. In politics, it has no consistent application. It's an empty word. And for that reason, so useful and so dangerous. Before we continue with our program, I want to focus on something. I want to pause, actually, and then focus on something that fits directly into the themes that we covered here. We are living in a moment where powerful institutions continue asking for public trust, even as their actions show very little accountability or foresight. For years, the Federal Reserve told Americans that inflation was temporary and the system was sound, yet the cost of ordinary life keeps rising. Groceries cost more, utilities cost more, housing is increasingly out of reach for many, and Washington keeps spending as if none of this has consequences for real people. Here's what stands out. The individuals and institutions closest to the financial system are preparing for uncertainty. Goldman Sachs is warning of a 10 to 20% market decline. Morgan Stanley has moved away from the long-standing 60-40 portfolio approach and now recommends that investors hold roughly 20% in gold and silver. That's not a small tweak. It tells you that confidence in policymakers and centralized monetary decisions is weakening. Earlier this year, gold broke above $4,300, but not because of speculation, but because real assets do not rely on political promises or carefully crafted press statements. If you have retirement savings, it is reasonable to evaluate options outside a system that has shown it can misjudge fundamental economic realities. Golden Crest Metals has created a clear guide that explains why major banks now say every portfolio should include gold and silver, and how to add them to a retirement account tax and penalty-free in 3 simple steps. They also provide a complimentary portfolio review, and for qualified accounts, they offer free shopping, free secured storage, or a free home safe if you prefer to hold metals at home. And qualified accounts may receive up to $25,000 in free silver. To request the guide and speak with their team, call 888-614-7120 or visit goldencrestmetals.com. Again, that's 888-614-7120, goldencrestmetals.com. If the system is not prepared to protect your future, then the responsibility to protect it falls on you. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.